I'm Nathaniel Dillon.
And I'm Damen, and this is our podcast on police discretion.
I'm arguing that police discretion is a necessary part of a policeman's job, and it is absolutely necessary for them to be able to enforce the laws in a way that the community finds reasonable, acceptable, and just.
I'm arguing that police discretion is a little too uncontrolled right now. Police officers are able to basically do whatever they want within restraints, and I think that really does take the power away from the people. It takes the rights away from the people, and it can lead to officers overstepping their boundaries. Even if they don't mean to, it still allows for the possibility of that happening.
What always comes to mind when talking about something like this is the quote from Wilson and Bittner, where police see their authority as a resource in accomplishing their objectives, and the application of their authority is not an ends but a means. And what that means to me is that it's not about just robotically enforcing the law, it's about how you enforce the law. Because at the end of the day, you're not just enforcing a set of rules, you're dealing with people in the community, and to effectively deal with that community, you need to be able to meet them on a human level and treat them different case by case based on the whole totality of the circumstances. And if you just try and police based on rules alone, it's always going to end up in a situation where people are unsatisfied with the end results.
That's completely fair, but I will use one of your own words against you. You said a case-by-case basis. Officers are a case-by-case basis. While some officers will use their discretion completely safe, completely to the book of how they're supposed to treat people, then police discretion can work out. But we see time and time again, there are a multitude of officers, whether it be because of bad training or whether it be just because they're bad people in themselves, they go too far with their discretion. They make arrests they don't need to make. They be a little too physical with people they don't need to be physical with. This especially happens to mental health issues, to people with drug problems, to people out on the street. While I do agree that it is a case-by-case basis, depending on who's out in the streets or who they are interacting with out in the streets, the officers are a case-by-case basis. They need to be trained better. We can argue about discretion, but they need to be trained better at the bare minimum, because without this training, there's the massive risk of taking it too far.
Well, I definitely agree that there are aspects of officer training that definitely needs to be upped. One thing that jumps to me, especially when you're talking about interacting with people and like when the arrests are made, is a quote by Tyler from 1990. People are more satisfied and view their authorities as legitimate when they are treated with dignity and respect, even when the outcomes are unfavorable. And I think what that means to me is that it's not just about, obviously some officers are going to overreach, and that is just part of the job, unfortunately. But if you followed the book, I think it would end up with every officer overreaching, because there's just so many little laws that if you're enforcing them robotically all the time, everybody's going to be breaking. And I think if you take away discretion and you take away the officer's ability to be like, hey, this guy's having a mental breakdown on the side of the road and he's throwing shits at cars. And it's not like, hey, this guy needs help. Let me see what I can do for him. Let me talk to him. Let me get some resources out here and we can try and figure this out together as a member of the community. Instead, it's this guy committed vandalism and I have to book him and take him in immediately. And while I'm definitely not arguing that officers don't need better training than what they have right now, I think taking away discretion or limiting discretion is only going to make that problem worse.
I can agree with you on some aspects. However, officers have the discretion out in public of professionals. If a doctor sees a patient, he has multiple different types of treatment options he can take with that patient, multiple types of surgeries. There are a large amount of things that they can do. And this is the same for officers. However, officers are more sub-professionals than genuine professionals. Because while they have this discretion to do whatever they not want, but whatever the situation requires, they don't have the proper training in which to actually implement it. If you went to the hospital and your doctor was unsure how to perform a surgery or wasn't correctly trained in the different treatment options that are available to you, it would be a massive scandal and you would no longer see the doctor. However, with officers, if they're untrained, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to deal with the situation you're dealt, which is both unfair for the person that is speaking to the officer, but it's also unfair to the officer who just wasn't properly trained.
I definitely agree. I think instead of sub-professionals, I like to look at them more through Lipsky's view of street-level bureaucrats, where they're public servants who have to interpret an incredibly vague set of laws that are not meant to be followed perfectly in every situation and apply them in the complex human situations. And you make the analogy between them and a doctor, and I think the difference is if a doctor makes a small mistake due to a lack of knowledge, you can die. But I think police officers need to be able to interact with people in a way that a doctor doesn't. They need to be able to figure out how to meet people where they are and tailor their responses to the problems that they're having with this given person, instead of just, for a doctor, you treat every cancer patient the same way. You cut out the tumor, you treat it with chemo. But every person's personality and how they react to situations is a little bit different. And I think that's where the discretion comes in a lot more. And that's why you need to be able to let officers deal with things where they're at. You gotta leave them this professional judgment, and you gotta hold them obviously to a higher standard, which is why I think it's a great idea to use the what would a skilled officer have done. Even if it isn't a perfect standard, it is a good way to get officers to think about, okay, how do I handle this in a more professional way? And how do I tailor the law to who I'm dealing with in a way that helps them?
I can agree with you on that. And I think one thing we could also both agree on with is the fact that zero tolerance policing is just something that should never be used in any manner. According to Braga et al., in an article written in 2017, zero tolerance policing is policing initiatives that attempt to prevent serious offending by indiscriminately cracking down on minor crimes committed by all offenders. This is taking discretion to the max. It's seeing someone walking and stopping them just because of the possibility that they might have drugs on them or they might have a gun on them. While we can agree that officers themselves are a case-by-case basis and everything in the day-to-day is a case-by-case basis, it depends on the people they meet, the day they've had themselves and what they're going to do. Stopping people for no reason, for any minor offense, even something like taking someone and frisking them because they jaywalked across the street, is a complete violation of all that person's rights. It's a complete abuse of the discretion that officers are given, and it's something that should not be used at all.
I 100% am going to agree with you there. Yeah, obviously, zero tolerance policing was a massive failure across the board. And I think the problem with zero tolerance policing was it was absolutely, it was this organizational push backed by completely unregulated, just overreach of police authority. And I think that's why if you're going to give the police the discretion, you also have to, on a higher level, push them towards the guardian model and away from the warrior model. And I think that's the problem with zero tolerance policing, is that it was police discretion, but with a bad push from the top on how to use that discretion. And I think that's why you need a shift towards the guardian model if you're going to give them this unfettered discretion. So instead of, just arresting people wherever you see them, like you were saying, on the assumption that they might have drugs, go out into the community and talk to the people and say, like, what are the problems you're facing? And then try and meet them there. And you can work with the community instead of just punishing anybody you see on the street on the off chance that they might have committed a crime.
For sure. It's an organizational issue. There needs to be more organizational pushes towards the guardian model, because zero tolerance policing is just the warrior model in a policy. It's going out there and just attempting to solve crimes and trying to find crimes before they even happen. It's something that needs to change from the top down. It's something that needs to, because just being a guardian, being more towards the guardian philosophy, helping people, that's the job of an officer. It's to help people who need your help. And trying to view every single person as a potential criminal instead of just people that are sometimes going to need your help it creates a very bad environment, which is why community policing is so important. Back in the 1970s, when community policing was starting to become a more used practice, team policing was actually the first list on the list of innovations that was used. According to Scogan in 2008, he said the police departments in New York City, Cincinnati, and Los Angeles were using this type of team policing, which is where they kept officers in the same areas. So they got familiar with the people, they got familiar with the streets, and they got familiar with the people who committed the crimes, which can just lead to a better environment for all involved, which will lead to better discretionary choices, as well as better relations with the community.
Yeah, I mean, I just 100% agree with you there. Obviously, the role of the police is not, I think, at the end of the day, it's not to stop crime, which I feel like is a little bit strange to say, but I do think it is to meet the community where they need you to be. And I think a beautiful mix of these two things in my head was Operation Ceasefire, where instead of just going out, because they knew they had this huge problem with gun violence, especially in youths in Boston, and instead of just going out into the community and, maybe arresting every single person that they thought looked like they might have a gun, or stopping and patting and frisking everybody that they can get their hands on, what they did is they met with community leaders and they met with members of the community, and they found a way that they could all agree to work on this together. And they used all the abilities that they had, and they used all the discretion a police department can have. And we saw what that looks like when that discretion is used at its fullest, but in a targeted way that the community can support, in the way that they were talking about how they were going to come down hard on any gang member they could find and prosecute everybody in there. And I think that's the level of police discretion we need. We need that discretion to be targeted in a way that helps the community and the community understands and also supports. Because if you just go out there and you start arresting everybody and you don't explain why you're doing it and you don't explain what your end goal is, you're always going to face pushback. And I think at the end of the day, that's what police discretion should look like, is working with the community to help them in the best way possible.
For sure. That's something we can definitely agree on. There needs to be better relations. There needs to be a clear-cut plan on what officers are trying to do for their communities. It can't be an us versus them perspective on either side, because all that's going to do is create bad attitudes towards police. It's going to create bad attitudes towards the people. It's going to create more stress. And what happens when people are stressed? Worse choices are made. An officer that feels at ease in a community where he knows 50% of the people that live there is going to be able to use their head in a situation where it's like, okay, I know I'm not in danger from anywhere else. I just need to solve this specific problem I'm working on, which can lead them to making better choices instead of being worried that maybe they'll get shot from another source in a neighborhood, or maybe they'll be recorded by 17 people. That stress leads to worse decisions being made, which leads to worse discretion being used, which just leads to a worse relationship with the community. And that's why community policing is so important. There needs to be better relationships. There needs to be better communication between both sides. And that shouldn't be a both sides. It should be working towards the common goal of keeping everyone safe, keeping everyone happy, and keeping everyone healthy.
Couldn't agree more. I think at the end of the day, that's what the police discretion is all about, is just working together with the community and finding out how you can help them and making sure they know that you're there to help. And I think when that discretion comes up, that's how it needs to be used. And at the end of the day, that's as simple as it is. You have to have a clear oversight from higher ups so you can push the police to use the discretion in a way that everybody can get behind.
Couldn't agree more. That was our episode on police discretion. Tune in next week, but you can't because there's no episode.
All right, bye.